Oh, the Catskills. Oh gosh, I spent a summer dancing in the Catskills.
Mm.
Oh Lord, you're the one who went.
All
Southern
right, we
Oregon,
are
cool.
live. Happy Tuesday and welcome, Realmies. We're excited you're here for the book backpack synopsis edition. We had a great time last Tuesday, so you can pop over into the YouTube and watch that if you didn't get a chance to be there with us. But we are blessed to have two of our conference keynote speakers with us this evening, afternoon, depending on where you are. James L. Rubart and Tosca Lee, both are multi-award winning authors. Jim, between dirt biking and water skiing, he managed to write 16 novels, go figure, and was inducted into the Christie Hall of Fame. Tosca is the author of 11 novels, winning a multitude of awards when she's not traveling all over the world. You can catch her on Instagram and find out where she is at any given moment. So without further ado, I'm excited you're here. We're excited to hear from Jim and Tosca, and we'll let you take it away.
Well, Tosca, it's really good to meet you. I've heard a lot about you over the years.
Yeah,
so
Jim, I've heard great things about you, and actually, Jim and I are old friends, and I miss you, man.
I know, I miss you too.
I'm
so psyched that we're gonna see each other at Realmakers. It's gonna be
I
fun.
am too, because it's been a minute since I saw you.
It has been a minute. It has indeed.
Yeah.
Okay, so Tosca, kick us off. I have a good synopsis story. I know you have one too.
All right. Well, first, let me just tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Tosca Lee. If we've never met, I'm married to a farmer. I am coming to you live from the farm, and we are about to get a thunderstorm. So if you hear some rumbling, it is not my stomach, as far as you know. It is the sky and the thunder that's coming in. So hopefully my connection holds. Jim and I go way back. We have toured together. We've done conferences together, and we've had so many great times. And we have been on this journey together for many years, since my very first novel and your very first novel.
Yeah, mine too. Yeah.
Right. I believe. Yeah. So okay. So my synopsis story goes back even farther, and some of you may have heard this. If you've heard me speak, you may have heard this one. But I wrote my first novel in 1989 at the age of 2. Okay. It was my first year in college, and I came home from college for spring break, my first year, and I was riding in the car with my dad. And for whatever reason, I was talking about how great novels are like a roller coaster with twists and turns and all that stuff. And that day, my dad changed my life by saying, "Hey, Tosk, I'll make you a deal. I'll pay you what you would have made this summer working at the bank. If you write your first novel, do it full time and treat it like a job." And so this was a no-brainer. So, but writing the novel was not a no-brainer. So I spent that summer writing my first novel, which is a whole different story. I got it done, and it was bad, and it's still in my basement, skeletons where it belongs. Sometimes people ask, hey, are you ever going to put that out there and publish it? And the answer is no. I don't even want to read that thing. But the following summer, I decided to submit it, and it was very dramatically titled Twilight of the Ancients. And another book came out with that title not too long ago. So I feel like, I didn't jump on that fast enough or whatever. But anyway, the following summer, I decided I'm going to submit this to agents. And so I made my list of dream agents, and I put together the proposal and did everything wrong. And in that, time, we didn't have email or anything. You had to send the whole thing in if they requested it, which they did. They requested the whole thing. So I did everything wrong. Anyway, not too long ago, I found my rejection letter from that
cool.
agency. And it's faded, but it's still legible. And it says, "Dear Miss Lee," this poor person who had to read the slush pile wrote me back a personal response, which you don't often get these days. So I'm grateful for it. Wrote me back a response that said, "Dear Miss Lee, even after reading the 23-page synopsis, We are still not sure what this novel is about. And on the day that I found that, multi-published, having hit bestseller lists, all this stuff, I died. I was so mortified. Apparently, I really wanted to make sure that they knew what the book was about. And apparently I fell very short, even in 23 pages. So that is my synopsis horror story. And I would say my first synopsis, don't write a 23-page synopsis. So that's my story. All right, Jim.
Mine has some similarities. I was going to my first writing conference, Mount Hermon, 2006. And so I was thorough. I had investigated all the editors, all the agents. I thought I was ready. So I had written a query letter for every personalized to each agent, each editor. I mean, I'm ready to go. Well, there was one editor I didn't think I was going to get a chance to see, but I found him sitting alone right before a meal. And it's like, well, why not? And I said, hey, can I tell you what my story is about? And he very graciously said, sure. We got 10 minutes, sure. And so I should have just sat there and told him about the story, but man, I was loaded for bear. So I ran back to my room. And so I get back by the time I'm sweating. And when I got to my room, I'm going through all my query letters and I realized he was the one editor I did not personalize a query for. So I have to pull out a query that's not addressed to him and give him it, right?
Yeah.
But of course, before I went to the conference, I realized I had to write a synopsis and I had no idea what I was doing, just like you, Tosca. And so what I did is I don't know how long it took. It took a long time. So I took a 95,000 word and I went chapter by chapter, just trying to get it down as much as I could. And I beat you slightly. I got my synopsis to 6 pages.
You beat me more than slightly.
Yeah. And so I give him this query letter and he graciously ignores the fact that it's not addressed to him, reads it, he goes, okay, well, you've got my interest. Can I see your synopsis? And I'm so proud of this synopsis, right? 6 pages. I got 90,000 down to 6 pages. I'm so excited. I hand it to him. He takes one look at it and he goes, I can't read this. He tosses it to the side. And again, he was very gracious. He goes, so just tell me what the book's about. And so it ended up being a good meeting. But to your point, Tosca, 6 pages, 23 pages, that's a little on the long side.
Yeah. So let's give a first initial piece of advice for a good synopsis. You've got a page to 2 pages. I'd say, what's the longest you would go these days, Jim? Two
is the longest I'd go personally. And this brings us to a really good point, Tosca. What you're bringing up is, what is the goal of the synopsis?
Yeah.
Right. What is the end result? Stephen Covey was famous for, as saying, begin with the end in mind. What do you want to have happen? Well, what you want to have happen is them to go, I want to read the whole thing. And if you can do that in a paragraph, great. It's probably going to take you longer than a paragraph. But personally, I would love to see it 1 page if you can do it in one.
Yeah, I've never been able to yet. Not yet. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what makes a great synopsis.
Yeah.
Other than, keeping it to 1 page or 2 pages.
Yeah, 2 pages. So let's stay. For me, a great synopsis, again, hooks the editor or agent where they're going, I have to read this thing. It tells me, if I'm an editor or an agent, it tells me they can complete a story arc. They can bring it to a satisfying conclusion. And I want to be at the end of reading a synopsis, go, wow, this is a great story. I wonder if they can actually pull it off writing it. So I got to see. It's because really a movie, the way to think about a synopsis in my mind is, a synopsis is a movie trailer that gives away the whole movie.
Right. Yeah. And that's important. You can't be coy in the synopsis. You can't try to be coy. They really do want to know the spoilers in the synopsis. So you need to let them know what those are along the way.
Yeah, so true. Give me all the spoilers. Give me all the twists and turns. Give me all the cool things that are happening. So let me ask you this, and this is something people might not know, so I'll say it. the synopsis is the big, huge, broad strokes. It's the big twist and that kind of thing. It's do not get into the detail. Don't get into the minutia. How do you keep yourself from doing that when you're writing a synopsis, Tosca?
Well, first off, let me just say that there are so many other things I'd rather do than write a synopsis. I'd rather clean my vacuum cleaners. I would rather pull my fingernails out with pliers. I mean, this is one of the things that I find incredibly difficult. It always is too long. And so the way that I keep from getting kind of in the weeds with the minutia is I write it, it's always too long, and then I start calling back until I get to the right length. And it takes me several editing passes to get through it. And there's a few things I'm looking for. I'm looking for succinctness. I'm looking for a longer version of my log line of my pitch. So if I were doing an elevator pitch, if you guys have ever pitched to an agent or editor, generally you get about 90 seconds to really say what your story is. So I'm looking for a 1 to 2 page version of that pitch that gives everything away, like Jim said, and then that still retains the as much as possible, that still retains a little bit of the voice of the story so that we can hear a little bit of it.
I think that's really important, what Tosca just said, because over the years, synopsis, people have thought, oh, it's just reporting. It's just the facts, ma'am. It's just very almost dry. And I understand that. It's kind of like a book report, but it has to have some flair to it. It has to have, not over the top, but it is still your writing style. It still is your voice. If it's a dark story, it's going to have a different flavor than if it's a comedy. And so don't be afraid to put some of your touch on it, if that makes sense.
A little bit of that voice, a little bit of whatever that flair is, so you can hear a little bit of the genre in it. And also, like Jim said, we need to know that the arc is there. And what do we mean by arc? Well, generally, when I think of that, I'm thinking of like 3-act story structure. Yep. So, make sure that you're familiar with that, but you want to be able to illustrate in your synopsis, act 1, 2, and 3, and the build up to the climax, and, the, how that climax is resolved. So make sure that you're showing that in your condensed version when you do that.
Yeah. And it's using movies again as an example, in the trailer, you don't see all the characters. And so in your synopsis, we don't need to know about all the characters, because think about an agent or an editor reading synopsis after synopsis. If you're outlining 6 different characters, it's like, it's too much. It's too much. And they're just like, okay, I'm lost. The brain, the way our brain works, is it tries to survive and thrive, meaning I want to burn the least amount of calories possible. And you got a long list of names in there. You're burning too many calories. So,
yep. Too hard to remember, especially for someone who's reading several of those in the course of a day, like your agent.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a big, let me ask you this, Tassa. I'm back to your elevator pitch thing. I'm a big believer in writing synopses. I've seen some people hear it just, here it is, here's the title, and you go into it. I'm a big believer in that hook. I want to give them that log line that they're going to go, wow, okay, where are you going with this?
Yeah.
And it can be really short. Like for my first novel, Rooms, it's pretty simple. My pitch for that was, a man inherits a home that turns out to be a physical manifestation of his soul. Boom, that's really short. And either somebody's going to go, well, what is that? Or not for me. I want that up front really quickly. I want that worm on the hook really clear and really short as possible.
Yeah, let's talk about the value of that, because there's not just value in I want that, but there's also value in not for me. Why is that valuable? Because then we're not wasting anybody's time, including our own. So not every story is going to be for every agent or editor.
Right.
And by throwing that out there right away, it reminds me of when I met my husband. Boom, right out there, he's like, I have 4 kids. And I was like, okay, but he threw it out there so that, and this is kind of like that, here it is. And that way, if it's not the right one for that agent or editor, then they can pass, and, we're not sitting around for weeks and weeks wondering. So I think that's great. And I like those hooks. I like good story hooks in the first paragraph and the second paragraph. In the rising action of the synopsis, the condensed version of our story, I like seeing the hook, like, are they going to be able to meet the story goal, whatever it is. I like those. I think those are really important to keep you reading through the synopsis, because if you can't keep reading through a synopsis, then guess what? Nobody's gonna want to keep reading
Right.
390 pages of this stuff, right?
Right, exactly.
So, get those little hook lines, grappling lines in there, and a couple of your, I call them dun dun dun, end a paragraph or two with the dun dun dun, but make sure you do give it away and say what happens.
Yep,
So.
that's good. Okay, something else that popped into my mind. I don't know if you experienced this, Tosca, but since I'm a discovery writer, much more of a seat of the pants discovery writer, I remember writing the synopsis for my second novel, and the publishing house bought it.
Mhm.
And then I was absolutely in a panic because it was changing. It was not following. It was going down. It's like, it's not what I gave them as far as the synopsis. And my agent was so great and goes, no, don't worry about it. Hey, write the story. It's okay. It's the basic thing.
Right.
And that was, I didn't know. I was so worried about that. And so for those of you who are pantsers who are going, yeah, but what if the story changes? That's okay.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I am not a pantser. I do outline, and I don't outline to the detail. I leave some room for things to happen, because it seems like, for me at least, things always do. But I never feel, when I've been asked for a synopsis before from my publisher and I turn it in, I never. Okay, this is just between you and me and everybody.
Right. Okay, everybody plug your ears.
Yeah, everybody plug your ears. But I never feel completely bound to that synopsis, because I feel like they know. And honestly, I don't know many writers that adhere perfectly to their synopsis. I don't know if I know any. I don't.
Yeah, that's the unknown secret about plotters, is they actually go off.
We go off the rails.
They go off the rails a little bit too. And don't tell anybody this but discovery writers like me, I have an idea where the story's going to end before I start.
What? Anathema, blasphemy.
It is.
Yeah. I think that that's something not to worry about too much. I've never had an editor come back and say, wait a minute, you gave us this, and and this doesn't look like. No, never. That said, I have always turned in a story with a solid structure and the things that that a story is supposed to have. So I've made sure to give them, I've made sure to fulfill my promise.
Yeah.
As far as that goes.
Yeah. Anything else off the top of your head before we start taking questions that would be good for people to know?
Let's see.
We probably shouldn't assume anything. I was going to say, well, everyone knows you're supposed to write it in present tense, but maybe people don't know that. But that's the expectation, is you would write it in present tense. In a synopsis, we know that we turn in our manuscripts double spaced, but in a synopsis, it's going to be single spaced. So those of you who are going one page double spaced, no, you actually get it single spaced. In your
proposal, that's single spaced.
Yeah.
And the goal is for somebody to read that synopsis and say, I got to see at least how this starts, and then they read your sample. They go right on to the sample.
Yeah. And it's funny, I've heard some editors, and remember, every editor and every agent has a different style too. Some will get a synopsis and a manuscript at the same time. It's like, no, I'm not going to even read the synopsis.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to start reading the thing. And if I can go through a page and go, wow, this is good, then at that point I might go to the synopsis. And some of them go, no, I don't want to know how the thing ends. I want to read it like a reader. And so there's a lot of different variations. In other words, you have to give all the spoilers and how it ends. Well, if you're doing it right, if you have connected with an editor or an agent at a conference, you can ask them that question. Yes, I'd love to send you a proposal. I'm going to send you a synopsis. Do you want it spelled out, or do you want, because some of them will go, no, don't spell it out. Yeah. Give me a synopsis like it's back cover copy, which is an unusual request, but don't be shy to ask that editor or agent, how do you want the synopsis?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. If you have the opportunity to ask that question, that's a wonderful foot in the door, I think, or step up, or whatever, what's the metaphor? Step up. I think that's wonderful. If you don't get a chance to, and you go to the website and it says, please send us these materials, they may or may not read the full synopsis or whatever, but it's kind of like when you go to the drive-through and they give you the package with the knife, the fork, and the spoon. You may not use the spoon, but at least you've got it. So you give them the stuff they ask for. And that is the cardinal rule. When you're submitting, make sure you give them exactly what they asked for.
Yeah, these days there's just no excuse not to, like Tosca's saying, because it's all there. Days past, sure, you can say, well, I didn't know. Well, you can know pretty easy. And Tosca and I still talk to agent editors friends that go, did they even look at the website?
Read the instructions. That is the most basic thing, because if you can't do that, then, sorry, folks, but, it's not going to work. You got to be able to follow this, give them what they want. So,
yeah. So Stephanie, do you want to grab some of the questions, because they're going by so fast, and just read them to us, ones you think would be good to answer?
Yep, I can do that. Let me get up here to the top here. We had one come in pretty early. Realm Makers wanted to know if the agent of which you spoke earlier was Steve Lobby, but that could just been rhetorical. So we'll move on to the next one. The first question. I've seen submission guidelines that ask for 3-page synopses and 1 page. Should we start off writing 3 pages?
So the best, and here's another thing, there's no hard and fast rule on how to write a synopsis. You have to figure out what works for your style. I come from a copywriting background, right? I came out of radio and TV. And so my mentality, once I figured out, I'm just writing, it probably comes easier to me to condense all this down than maybe other people. But one way to go after it is to look at each chapter as a separate entity. And you're going to try to drill that thing down, each chapter, just to the absolute essentials. In TV, we'd call it a log line, right? So you take a half-an-hour sitcom or an hour drama and you drill it down to 1 sentence. And so a good way to train yourself to write a synopsis would actually be take TV shows that you know, and then take TV shows you know, and then read the log lines and go, oh, that's how they did it. And I would go to Rotten Tomatoes and look at movies you know, and then they have that recap, right? This is what the movie's about, and it's pretty short. And so that'd be a good training ground for you to do. And the other thing is practice writing synopses of your favorite novels, where you go, do it on something that doesn't matter before you do it on something that does matter. Right. So practice on this novel, that one of your favorite novels. Can I get it down to 1 page? Yeah.
If I had to do a 3 and 1 page, I personally would write a 3-page and then condense it down.
Yeah.
But that's just my personal style. And I think it's really important, like what Jim said, you need to find the way that works best for you. And I think that goes for every single aspect of writing, not just approaching a synopsis or a proposal, but find the way to approach your writing, whether it's pantsing or whether it's outlining or whether it's with music or without music or with people or without people or, whatever that works for you. And so, the best way to figure that out is to, just dive in and write a couple of those dreaded synopses and get it in there. But yeah.
Awesome. Quick question about the difference between a synopsis and an overview. How would you define those two? Or are they different? Are they the same?
I think I might have put an overview in one of my more recent proposals. For me, that's just a short little thing. That's just a quick little, paragraph or 2 about the book, but a synopsis is longer. Trying to see what I've got, because I generally, will include a log line, a brief overview, and then the requisite marketing stuff and all that, and then the synopsis. But to me, that's a shorter thing, more like a back cover copy. But I don't know, Jim, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you explained that well. An overview is the broadest of brushes, just a big idea of what it is. It's a paragraph. It's not back cover copy, but it's kind of in that same realm. Whereas a synopsis is, I'm giving you the structure, not the structure, but I'm giving you all the major beats of the story all the way through. So,
yeah.
Overview is the movie trailer. The synopsis is the movie trailer that gives away every plot point.
Yeah. Awesome. Great question, Heather. Thank you.
Yeah,
and
good question.
Maybe a good you mentioned back cover copy, and that segues into Pam's question a little bit about if you can speak to the relationship between the back cover copy, the synopsis, and maybe even the one sheet as well.
Mm-hmm. I just looked, by the way, and my overview for the last book I sold was just a few paragraphs. It was short. It wasn't even a page. I mean, it is like a backstory, a back cover type thing. Sorry, Jim.
Oh, no, thank you. So for me, back cover copy is a marketing tool. It is to hook you, right? Enough that you go, oh my gosh, I got to at least either I'm going to buy the book or I'm going to turn and read a little bit of it. All right. And so back cover copy is asking all these questions and stirring up all these ideas and these imaginations in your mind. Whereas a synopsis is, again, I don't want it to be dry, but it's a book report. Like when we were in school, it's a book report and you're telling what happened in the story. And so it's, yeah, it's just not more clinical. Again, I don't want to make it sound like it's stiff and dry and clinical and all that, but it kind of is, right? It is.
And the challenge is to kind of get your voice in there, the voice of your character or your narrative in there just a little bit. But that, I find that to be one of the most challenging aspects of writing the synopsis, is to get a little bit of that voice in there.
Yeah, it's really hard
because it is fairly dry because you're hitting all the major, plot points throughout the book. So
since it's realm makers, this analogy will work. It's you'll get this. It's Frankenstein, and you're building the monster. You're building the skeleton. You are building the skeleton, and the editor and agent wants to see, Tosca, can you really attach that foot?
Yeah.
Can you really attach all the hands? And can you get? Oh, you can. Okay, you've.
Why is there an arm in the middle of the forehead?
Right, Tosca, why have you put the arm in the forehead again?
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's see. Chris asks, and this is a great question. I hear this a lot. Chris asks if you've got a series. You've got a series going. When you do your synopsis, do you include anything about the books coming after that one? Do you stick to just the one story? And then Jesse kind of tags onto that and just says, do you let's see, if we're writing a series, should the synopsis be for book one or the entire story, or just for the first book?
I have some thoughts.
Yeah, please.
When I've written a trilogy and I've written 2 duologies, and I've never known what's happening in the next book after the first one. Every single time I've written myself into a corner, and then it's like, oh no, how am I going to get out of this? So, but that said, if you're doing a series and you might know what happens, like just one line, like log line of like what happens in book 2, if I was organized enough to think ahead and know that, I would be tempted to just say, in book 2, the adventure continues with blah, 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 book 3, blah, 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 and book 4, the ultimate showdown with blah, 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 blah. Just like boom, 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 one to 2 lines per book. I would be tempted to just say kind of, here's how the rest of it goes. Kind of like if you're outlining like, a season of TV or a second season or something like that. Just like, here's what's going to happen in the next season or the next whatever. So, but I have just never been in that place because I don't think that far ahead. So.
Yeah, that's really good, Tosca. I don't know how to answer the question because I was thinking about my Wellspring series, which was a 3-book series, and I'm trying to think back. It's like, okay, we figured out the basic idea of book one. I had no idea about book 2 or 3. Really good question. So I love your idea that probably works. If you're pitching a series, it's like first book, this is how it's going to happen. Second and third book, it's maybe a couple lines,
like
maybe
this.
a paragraph, and that's it. This is where I see it going, type thing.
But I think that, your focus really is on that first book, because they got to buy that first one, and they need to not only buy it, but they need to invest in it. Otherwise, there's not going to be a second or third book.
Right. And does it make sense, Tosca, that if they see you can do book 1, gosh, they've got this, they're going to trust you to be able to do book 2 and 3?
I would think so, especially by the time you do your proposal and you have your sample. And then if they ask for the whole manuscript and they see it, and they see that you are, you're in charge and you got that thing, then I would assume so.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. So this, let's see, a question. So assuming the synopsis follows a 3-act structure, and this goes back to, you've alluded to it a couple of times, Jim, about keeping the synopsis from sounding dry. How do you know what to keep in and keep out to find out what's important in the synopsis?
Again, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but it is the broad brush strokes. It is the big major things that are happening. But to Tosca's point, you can start, with that 3-page synopsis. Honestly, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing that I did the 6-page synopsis, because I did chapter by chapter. But I just didn't know. I didn't know 6 pages was too much. I think if I had known and I'd worked on that, I could drill that down each chapter to the major happenings, and it would have worked. So not necessarily that it was a bad synopsis, just that it was exorbitantly too long.
Don't talk to me about exorbitantly too long, Jim.
23. Man, you more than tripled my output.
That's so embarrassing.
So let's see. Andy says, my book has 2 points of view where the characters are in different worlds and their stories don't intersect until the very end. What are your tips for writing a synopsis when both POVs are important to the story arc, but the characters don't interact?
You got to get creative there. I think you have to get a little creative. For me personally, if that's where my story was coming from, I would be tempted to, like, in this paragraph, start off, here's, what's going on with this character in this world or whatnot. And the second paragraph, meanwhile, back at the farm, or, whatever, meanwhile, so-and-so over here is attempting to whatever, and then I would intersect them in the synopsis myself, to show how they finally intertwine and the stories come together. I wouldn't change anything about the point of view in the synopsis. I would, in my overview or in, my brief description, I think I would say something like, written in 2 different points of view, something like that, so that they know. That's just how I would do it. That's the way I would do it. Jim, what would you do?
I do exactly the same thing. I'd come at it exactly like that. I worked with an author on her back cover copy recently, and she has 4 different points of view, 4 different characters that don't come till the end exactly what's going on here. And in the back cover copy, it's this person, this person, this person, this person. Now we set it up so you can see they're going to tie together. Then we introduce the 4, then we tie it all up at the end in the back cover copy. And so it's the same thing in the synopsis. Tosca's absolutely right. You come at it from this point of view, and then you introduce this character, and then you kind of explain how their worlds are slowly coming together. Don't make it too hard. In other words, I think you're probably more able to do it than you think you are.
Yeah. And keep it simple, not too complicated.
Right.
Just narrate it in a very simple, streamlined way. So it's easy to read. Yeah.
Awesome. We have, I lost it. And let's see. Okay, here's a question from YouTube. Would you integrate the log line into the first line of the synopsis, or can it be separate from the synopsis itself?
Yeah, so it'd be premise, right?
Mhm.
Premise here, single line. Premise: a man inherits a home that turns out to be a physical manifestation of his soul. Premise, that line, and then synopsis, and then that's how I do it.
Yeah,
And then you write your synopsis.
that's exactly. So I'm looking at the one that I recently sold with a co-author friend of mine. And so our log line is just 3 best friends captured in the Philippines during World War II, vow to return home together, then struggle to survive against impossible odds. So that's our log line. And then I got my sales handle, hook, overview, stuff like that. And then the actual synopsis happens beneath that. And that's two pages. So slightly less than 2 pages.
Right.
Yeah.
We may look into this a little bit more, but Amy asks, just on the flip side, but do you all off the top of your head know of any resources where we could find examples of synopses, or where they could get their hands on?
There's an editor. I'm not sure if he's with Writer's Digest anymore, but he was for a year, Chuck Sambaccini, and he did this thing. And I would Google this because when he was teaching synopsis, I really like this method. What he does is he takes a movie, right? That's a well-known movie, and then he'll write a synopsis of that movie.
Mm.
So since a lot of us know a lot of movies, maybe more than we all know the same books, it's a great way to go, all right, how would you take Gladiator? Gladiator is, for example, is one of the movies that he writes a synopsis for. So since you know the movie, you read the synopsis, that's a good way to train yourself as well.
And are those available online, do you know? Or you might just try searching. You might just try a Google search for a synopsis and maybe for a movie, like a movie synopsis. But it seems like there's some Writer's Digest books that may have good examples, or some mock-up examples as well on that.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing to remember, to piggyback off of what Tosca is saying, is you have this amazing tool in front of you called the computer, where you Google how to write great synopses or examples of great synopses. There's a ton of information out there. And so pull up 10 different sites and read it all, and then just start to immerse yourself in it. It's like training yourself to do anything. But there's a lot of bad info, but probably a lot more good info out there.
There might be some good examples on there. It seems like I taught a thing on proposals once, and I was looking for active examples because, back in the day when I was doing this, I'm dating myself once again, but there was no internet, right. So it was all Writer's Digest books and, that kind of thing. And I'm assuming there's still some good Writer's Digest books that have some good examples, but definitely Google it and search it up, because I know I found some full like proposal examples on there. You just have to search around.
Yeah,
for sure. And I would say, just on a search, one of the ways I've found that things come up a little bit easier, because like you're saying, Jim, there's a lot of bad information. There's just a lot of information. Sometimes it's hard to know how to pin that down. Weirdly enough, if you do an image search for some of this stuff, I know it sounds weird, but sometimes you can kind of whittle down to some really good sources doing just image search for anything. And then the other thing is Pinterest. I find a lot. I know it sounds weird, but sometimes Pinterest will help weed out some of that extra, because it can be overwhelming.
Jenny says Simply Synopsis by Michelle Summers is excellent. And then Karen found the Chuck Sambaccino.
There it is. That's example. The one. That's the guy. Okay. Yeah, great.
So grab that, you guys, and then write down Simply Synopsis by Michelle Summers, Somers. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks, Jenny. And
yeah, awesome.
Karen.
Thank you, guys. So our next question. Well, this one I think you guys have touched on. If the book is in first person, should the synopsis be in first person and in the main character's voice?
I wouldn't in first person. No, I wouldn't.
Again, you're doing a book report. right? And I wouldn't do it in first person. I'd do it because the standard present tense third person POV is kind of the standard.
Yeah. And I write in first person quite a lot, but I never do a synopsis in first person. It's always, Audra Ellison, thinks she's hiding out from the world or whatever to start the whole thing like that.
Awesome. So another YouTube question. Thank you, our YouTubers out there. If you have an ensemble cast, how many characters should you drill it down to? Just the two main characters?
Trying to think of a way, an analogy that'll help you think about this. Oftentimes I'll go to a movie and I'll go to IMDb because I like, learning more about movies, and I'll go, what? I thought there were a bunch of people in this movie. And honestly, there were only really like 3 people in the movie and then a bunch of supporting people. Typically the same thing in a novel. You think this person is a huge supporting person, and they are, but unless they are the instigator, the major twist, and it, all balances on this one person, less is more. Again, the goal of the synopsis is not to explain absolutely everything. It's for them to go, oh man, Tosca's got something here. Let's see if she can pull it off. Send me the full manuscript.
Yeah, I'm exactly with Jim here. And, just only the people who are integral to the major plot points that are in your synopsis. Now, if you're going to bring something up in the climax and, Suzette has something to do with that, and you've never mentioned Suzette earlier then, you need to mention her. But only the people who are, going to be the ones hitting the points in your synopsis.
Fantastic. Well, I've run through all of the questions. Wait here, Jesse. I'm guessing it's best to have your full manuscript 100% ready before you send in the synopsis.
Yeah, if you're sending in the synopsis and they like it, you better be ready to send that manuscript.
That's true. You don't want to be like, let me get back to you. So yeah, have that ready because, and especially if you're, in this case, if you're going to send the synopsis and it says these things are going to happen, then those things need to happen in this case, because this is not the same kind of situation where you already have a contract and your editor asks for what your next book is going to be about, and you give them a synopsis and it might change. This is different. What you give them needs to be a snapshot of the manuscript as a whole.
Okay, so that's a really, really good point that Tosca brought up. When she and I are talking about some of our synopses, we already have a contract with the publisher, and they just want to see, okay, what's the next book? How's it going to work? That kind of thing. If are not contracted, then it's a different scenario where that synopsis they better be pretty married to each other.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Fully married to each other.
Was that?
Fully married. I said pretty married. No, fully married.
Fully married.
That synopsis is going to recommend him very married.
Very, very married. Candy asks, is the synopsis only useful for submitting to an agent or editor? I'm indie published, but would I need a synopsis at any time?
Nay.
Yeah. Why put yourself through that?
Yeah.
Unless it's helpful for your outlining purposes, which it may be.
Yeah, it might be, or it might be helpful for your back cover copy, or it might be helpful. It could be, like Tosca says, you might go, wow, I've learned how to outline better by going through this process. But yeah. But
otherwise,
don't put yourself through that.
Why put yourself through that?
Yeah, that's awesome. Katie says, with the push for showing instead of telling in your story, would the synopsis be the place to actually tell instead of show?
Yeah, again, editors and agents realize what a synopsis is. Again, they want to see if you can put together a fully formed skeleton. then when they get the manuscript, then they can also put muscle and clothes and hairstyle and you know, all these cool, you know, things on top of it. But yeah, this is not where you're really worrying about showing. You are telling. It's a well done book report.
It's telling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if anybody else need to get their question in there, get that in there real quick. Otherwise, I'll let Tosca and Jim give us their final thoughts. Anybody else coming in here? Sarah had a good point, and this is for YouTubers who I don't think can see the chat. She says, it's like Guardians of the Galaxy. They're all super cool characters with stories, but Quill and Gamora are what I would call the mains because you see their backstories. I thought that was a really good point.
Mm-hmm. They're the heart of the story, or the foundation of the story.
Okay, well, that's what I've got from everyone else, unless there's one that I'm just going to slide in right under the wire there. But I don't see any other questions. Any other thoughts?
My final thought would be, and I'm big on this, like people say, how do I do media interviews, Jim? Well, you get a critique partner, just like you have for your writing, and you critique each other, you interview each other, right? Well, same thing with Synopsis. Find a partner and tear each other apart and say, this isn't working, this is working, and you can learn this together. And find somebody that really knows how to write synopses. I've had a lot of 15-minute appointments over the years at writing conferences. I've never had somebody come up and go, Jim, I need to write a killer synopsis. Can you help me with that? So that might be the best use of your time. Or at Realm Makers, since we're all going to be together, and I am taking 15-minute appointments, and so is Tosca, or even at a meal, you know, come up and go, you know, what do you think? Because that synopsis, unfortunately or fortunately, that's a way to get them to go yes or no. It's a big deal. A synopsis is a big deal.
It is a big deal. And I think that's a great idea, to have somebody read it so that they can say, you know, so what does this sentence have to do with the story? Or what is, you know, or this paragraph doesn't show how the story is moving, you know, toward the conflict or whatever it is. And, but, you know, and I would say too, you know, pretty much every author I know is kind of like, when it comes to writing synopses, but that said, take that opportunity to show off what your story is about.
Yeah.
And even though it's hard to do these sometimes, you know, revel in the opportunity to get those hooks in there, because this is like the big splashy fishing lure when you go fishing. And so, you know, bedazzle that thing. and so when you throw it out there, you're going to get something. So take that opportunity to get your hooks in there, and you know, that's kind of fun, you know, to really lure your reader in. And in this case, your reader is an editor or an agent, but those editors and agents were readers who loved stories first.
Good point.
So good, you guys. I know this is just, especially with the conference coming up, and like you were saying, all of the appointments, this is just, I can tell that this awesome information and helps put everybody in the right mindset of, you know, where do I go next? So I very much appreciate y'all's time, and we're excited to see you face to face. I know it's going to be so good.
Face to face
or virtual.
Or virtual.
Way. We are connecting with our virtual. We love our virtual attendees as much as I'm doing a little bit of the red carpet, if you guys were there for that last year, and I'll be kind of looking over the exhibit hall and bringing everybody virtual along with me. So
exciting.
That'll be good. Yes. So next week, Tuesday, we're going to have Jill Williamson, who is going to talk to us about, what are we talking about next week? Log lines. Talk about log lines. We touch on them a little bit here. So we're going to drill down into it, get specific, and help you guys put that together for your pitch. So same bat time, same bat channel. We'll see you here next Tuesday. Thank you, Tosca. Thank you, Jim, very much.
Absolutely. Thanks
Yep.
for having us.
Yeah, very fun.
Bye, guys.